Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Merlin Season 5, Episode 1, Arthur's Bane. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. The episode begins with a round table meeting that discusses an expedition that Gawain was sent on with Percival, and how they have not yet returned from that mission. We then get to see them out in the frozen north being ambushed and captured by Morgana. And then we also see that Morgana has sentenced them basically to hard labor underneath excavating underneath the castle tower that she is living in currently. This then leads to Merlin and Arthur, Elian, Leon, basically all the other knights going on a rescue mission from Camelot, where they happen upon a village where they see that everyone has been slaughtered. Meanwhile, we see that Morgana has forced Percival and Gawain into hard labor. Oh wait, I already said that. Basically, they're going back and forth between these scenes. Then at this slaughtered village, Merlin finds like this little alcove type cave. He goes into it. He finds what he thinks is a dead druid. The druid wakes up and basically tells him, that Arthur needs to, that he's known about Emersa's coming before Emrys ever set foot on the earth, and basically gives Merlin a warning before then dying, and then his hand falls into a pool next to him after he was warned about Arthur's Bane, and we see a prophecy where we see Mordred killing Arthur in the midst of a battle. This greatly impacts Merlin, who then is very distracted and quiet from there to the point where it is suspicious, and he starts getting asked by Arthur, like, what's wrong with him, if something's happened, etc. He then takes advantage overnight to run and call Kilgara, who then basically tells him that, druid prophecies are very strong and they should be heeded. However, like, they are not 100% accurately going to happen, and it is up to Merlin to use his knowledge to try to circumvent it or prevent it from happening. But that Kilgara cannot tell him how. That is something Merlin must come to on his own. The rescue expedition continues, and they stop in Annis's kingdom, who gives them safe passage. And when they are having dinner with her, they are given an update on Morgana and where she is. And then Merlin has to use magic to juggle because they think that he has skills, and even though he whispers to Arthur that he has no skills, they want a performance, and so he uses magic to help himself juggle. Meanwhile, back at Camelot, we discover that there's a new servant that is serving Gwen, and her name is Sifa. And then we also see that she is a spy for her father, Radin, who is helping Morgana, and so she leaves the castle to give her dad information, who then passes it on to Morgana, who then is able to ambush Merlin and Arthur's camp. And at this battle, Leon and Elian escape, Arthur and Merlin escape, but they separate, and Arthur and Merlin are wandering through the plains. Then Leon and Elian arrive back at Camelot to report what happened. Then, while they're wandering the plains, Merlin and Arthur come across some rabbits on the ground, and Arthur has the good sense to tell Merlin to wait. Merlin does not have good sense and decides that he's going to pick up these rabbits. Somebody in the frozen north, where food would be incredibly important, just decided to leave there on the ground. And of course, as soon as he picks one up, he releases a net. And Arthur and Merlin end up trapped in the net together overnight, and it's hilarious. Um, so that's great. We then have Sifa being found out and sentenced to death by Gwen, because that is what the laws of Camelot require. Meanwhile, Gawain, who's been laboring, sees some lights in a side tunnel and decides to follow them. However, when he follows them, he is found by one of the guards, and those guards that guard calls other guards, and then he's basically beaten. But then the Diamere, which is a magical creature that is the key to all knowledge and the last of her kind, finds him and decides to help him with magic to heal, though it's not an instant heal, so he is still there to rest. We then have Arthur and Merlin meeting the owners of the nets, who then cut them down, and then they are captured to be sold to Morgana as slaves. And Arthur is recognized by Ragnar or is it Lucor? Anyways, they are found by the, oh no, Lucor is the prophet. It was Ragnar who was the slave trader, who then wants to take them to Morgana but mistreats them until Mordred arrives and tells him to stop mistreating them and bringing them to Morgana instead of like, because like he says, Arthur is valuable dead or alive. So originally he was thinking maybe more on the dead side, but Mordred stops that and he's going to be sold alive. Then we go back to Camelot, where Gwen reveals, after Gaius asks for mercy, that she doesn't actually have any intention of executing Sifa, but that sending out word she is going to execute Sifa is going to then bring her father out of the woodwork, which is the true goal, as he's the dangerous one who's actually working with Morgana and committing treason. Meanwhile, Arthur and Merlin manage to cause enough trouble to bring Ragnar like right up into Arthur's face, where he steals a dagger. They then are able to plot. They manage to escape and run off, but they do then, from kind of a distance, follow the caravan back to where Morgana is. Radin does infiltrate into Camelot and does save his daughter, but he is injured in the process and he does end up dying once they reach the woods, and then Sifa, of course, runs. Arthur and Merlin infiltrate Morgana's fortress. Morgana and Mordred are reunited as the slave traders come in. And they have a dinner where Mordred kind of sees how far Morgana has actually fallen. Though she still definitely feels that connection she had with him as a child. As soon as she sees him, she immediately like runs out of the building to him. Then Arthur and Merlin, who are wandering, find Gawain and they see the Daimar, but they don't. The Daimar runs away from them, which is when they are able to stage the entire rebellion of the workforce by, giving Percival a weapon. Then Percival kills a guard, gives that weapon to one of the knights, and so on and so forth as they collect the weapons and gain in power. Meanwhile, Merlin manages to have an encounter with Athusa and realizes that she's crippled and can't fly. She's gaunt. She cannot speak. She does understand, like she's still held to the power of the Dragon Lord when he speaks in the dragon tongue, but she doesn't understand him. And he asks what happened, but of course, because she can't speak, she can't tell him. And then people start coming, so he then tells her to leave, even though at first it doesn't look like she wants to. Arthur and Morgana then confront each other again, and Morgana does kind of manage to initially get the upper hand. However, that is when Mordred decides to throw in with Arthur and stabs Morgana. helping Merlin and Arthur to escape, or at least no, he helps Arthur escape. Merlin is kind of left behind, but this is a good thing because then the Diamar comes over to Merlin and she basically asks him if there are any questions that he wants to ask her because she's the key of all knowledge. And he says no, but then changes his mind and says, if Mordred is not Arthur's bane, who is? And she answers, himself, meaning that Arthur himself is his own bane. And then we move forward to everybody back in Camelot and to Mordred being knighted for saving Arthur's life, a druid knight, and Merlin and Mordred have a conversation where Merlin's still suspicious, but at least being civil. However, then when he has dinner with Gaius, he does question, whether Mordred should be allowed to be there because there was a prophecy that Arthur would be killed by a druid, so Mordred may not be Arthur's bane, but he could be the one to kill him, and that one prophecy he saw in the pool did show just that. But Gaius says to leave it for now, and then the very final scene of this double episode was Morgana and Athusa making their way through the frozen north. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode. And as always, we will be ranking on the mostly objective ranking list first, which uses set values to determine the score, and while it is void of motion, bias and judgment can still apply. And then the personal ranking list, which is purely based on entertainment value and my opinion of the episode. So, starting with our mostly objective rank values. Single episode supporting character introductions, we have Sifa, who was the new servant who ended up being a spy for Ruadin, her father, who was a druid who was working for Morgana. Lokru was the prophet who was in the cave that showed Merlin, as he died, the prophecy that Mordred would be the one to kill Arthur on the battlefield. And then Ragnar was the slave trader who was going to sell Arthur and Merlin to Morgana. But of course they escaped and he failed. Each of them are worth 1 point each. That brings us to 4. Then we have our multi-season supporting character developments, which are worth 3 points each. So we see that Athusa ended up crippled, unable to speak, and was with Morgana. And we also see a scene where they're in a well for some time, so it seems that they were trauma bonded. Then we see that Mordred stabs Morgana, that Mordred gets knighted. So that's 9 points total for that segment, plus the 4 from before. So we're already over 10. Then we have an impactful / memorable moment / line / etc., which is naturally the net scene. Like I said, it was hilarious. It's one of the most memorable scenes in the series. And there's not much more to say than that. It was great. Then we have world building pieces worth 4 points each. And that's, of course, the introduction of the Diamar, which is a powerful creature of magic and is considered to be the key to all knowledge, which again reveals Arthur's bane as himself and is what Morgana is digging for under the castle that she's living in, or fortress, or tower, whatever the case may be. But of course hasn't been found because Daimar can use magic, so is able to stay hidden. And as we see in this episode, has been there the whole time and they haven't found her. So they probably are not going to. But it is also revealed that the one in this episode is the last of its kind. Then the second world building piece is the prophecy scene in the pool of Mordred killing Arthur on a battlefield. And at this point, we are so far beyond 10 points that there's absolutely no way this isn't a 10 out of 10 episode. But I'm still going to note that there was a continuity error in the fact that Mordred, okay, so obviously with Mordred, because these seasons are filmed back to back, there's no way the child Mordred would have grown up enough to actually be cast again as Mordred in his adult form. That's understandable that it would be a different actor, so there will be some variances. However, I feel like the variance between child Mordred's appearance and adult Mordred's appearance are so vastly different that there is no way anyone could believe or suspend their disbelief that that child grew into that adult. And with Gwen, they veered very far away from the legend with the casting as far as appearances go. And I don't like that in anything. But with Mordred, they are the ones who cast child Mordred. It's their own universe's version of Mordred that they have failed to stay true to, and they cast somebody who looks nothing like the child Mordred at all, so that you could believe that they go up. And it's like there's a few seasons in between. It's not like you don't know what actor you chose for child Mordred or what they looked like. And I mean, the eye color is completely different. The hair color and texture is different. The nose isn't even in the same realm. The only thing that they have in common between the adult and the child version is the skin color. That's it. Every other aspect is completely different. So I cannot suspend my disbelief and believe that child Mordred from like the early seasons grew into adult Mordred that we see in this season. And that to me is a big continuity error because it fully pulls you out of your suspension of disbelief while watching because it's just ridiculously different. And the fact is, there was absolutely zero reason, zero, that they couldn't have found an actor that had a similar appearance. Because they had already cast the child actor and the child version on screen, it would have been the minimalist amount of effort possible to just find an actor who looked similar and was talented enough to play the role, which I guarantee you did exist, and they, for whatever reason, chose not to put in that minimal amount of effort. So I'm taking 4 points for that, but again, we're still over 10, so it is a 10 out of 10 episode. And it is the first episode of season 5, therefore it is in first place, Arthur's Bane. On the personal side, well, I've already basically gone over everything that I enjoyed about the episode. I liked the net scene. It was great. I thought there was some good action. I like how it was traveling and we got multiple settings. I like that we're kind of starting after a time skip with Camelot flourishing and everybody kind of settled into their roles before entering into this action of these episodes because it is a double episode. Biggest gripe I had was the Mordred casting, and as a result of that, I do think I gave it a 9 because while it didn't impact the mostly objective list, it did impact my personal enjoyment of the episode. Like I said, it ruined my suspension of disbelief while I was watching. So overall, episode very good. Did not like Mordred's casting. I'll get over it by next episode, I'm sure. But for now, at least, this episode only got a 9 because I didn't like it. And it is first because it is the first episode of the season. Which brings us now to the series ranking so far. And currently on the mostly objective ranking, the order is season 4 in first, followed by season 2, season 3, season 1 currently in last place, and season 5 is starting with a 10 out of a possible 110. On the personal ranking side, we had season 4 in first place, followed by 3, followed by 2, followed by 1. So basically every season has gotten a little bit better than the last one. And season 5 so far is starting with a 9 out of 110, which is still a strong score. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Merlin Season 5, Episode 1, Arthur's Bane. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.